The metal tripod hit my shoulder with a dull, hollow sound that I will hear in my sleep for many months. The sound of old metal striking living flesh. The sound that my father, a former military man, 64-year-old Victor, heard and approved because his hand did not flinch, did not slow down, did not miss. He knew what he was doing. He was not aiming for my arm. He was aiming for my stomach, for my belly where my daughter was growing, but I turned in the last second. A mother's instinct that works faster than any military training, and the tripod struck my shoulder, and I heard the crack, and I fell to my knees. And between my legs rushed warmth that should not have been there at 34 weeks. Water. Amniotic fluid. Life leaking out of me onto the concrete slabs of my brother's backyard. In front of 30 guests who had come to celebrate a birthday and instead became witnesses to a father destroying his daughter and her unborn child. I am an accountant, 34 years old, 14 years of experience, an audit specialist at a small construction company. I carry a voice recorder with me not because I am paranoid, but because over 14 years of working with numbers and documents, I have learned one simple truth that my father, who commanded men for 20 years in the army, never understood. The truth does not need loud words. The truth needs evidence, and I collect evidence always at work, at the bank, at family gatherings, everywhere. There is a risk that someone might try to deceive me or destroy me. This habit began in my first year of work when my boss tried to blame me for a shortage of $80,000, and I came to his office with a folder of receipts, invoices, and statements spanning 3 years, and he resigned himself a week later. Since then I have known. Paper tolerates everything, but paper also protects. My house is a 2-story brick building with an attic and a small plot of land. I bought it when I was 26, paid the mortgage for 8 years, $285,000 remaining, almost finished, almost fully mine. I chose the paint for the walls myself, planted roses by the porch myself, hammered the key hook in the hallway myself. No man helped, no father blessed, no brother lent a hand. And this infuriated Victor more than anything else in the world, because his second wife, my stepmother, owned nothing of her own, because his son, my younger brother Derek, lived in his house and did not pay a penny for it, because Victor himself, a retired military man, had only his pension and a house inherited from his mother, while I, that same daughter of the betraying first wife, dared to be independent, dared not to ask, dared not to bow. You think that just because you have a house, you don't have to consider your family? He would ask every time I came for the holidays. I do consider them. Father, I come, I call, I help Derek with money when he needs it. Help Derek, he would sneer. You think that's help? You humiliate him. You show him that you're better. You always wanted to be better. Like your mother. And then he would press the button that was supposed to make me explode, but I did not explode. I was not my mother. I did not abandon children and disappear into nowhere. I was an accountant. I collected evidence, and when he said these words, I did not cry. I remembered. My father's trauma was older than me. He was almost 40 when my mother left, took Derek, who was 5, left Victor with debts and the feeling that the whole world was against him. He told this story at every dinner, every holiday, every family gathering, until it turned from a tragedy into a religion, until he believed that any woman who does not obey is an enemy who wants to destroy him, and I, grown up and owning a house, became for him proof that his first wife had been resurrected in me. He looked at me and saw her. He heard my voice and heard hers. He tolerated my existence for 20 years, and now that I was expecting a child and had become even more independent than before, he decided that it was time to stop me, time to remind me who was in charge of the family. I did not know how far he was willing to go, until the party, until the tripod strike. The family celebration was at Derek's house, his spacious home paid for by Victor. I arrived at 34 weeks pregnant, large, clumsy, but calm, because there were still 6 weeks until the birth. I had a plan, a ready room for my daughter, and a flash drive with the recording of a conversation hidden in a tin cookie box in the top drawer of my kitchen cabinet, in case my father decided to act. I did not know that he would decide to act today, but I always prepared for the worst, because accountants who have survived an attempted frame-up at work know one thing. Preparing for the worst is not pessimism. It is a professional habit. I brought food, baked a pie myself, even though my belly already made it hard to bend. I brought a gift for Derek, a set of tools. He did not know how to use tools, but I always gave him things that would be useful, not what he asked for. I did not know that this gift would be the last he would accept from me. Derek greeted me coldly, kissed me on the cheek as required by etiquette, and immediately retreated to the grill where his friends were already gathered. My stepmother was bustling in the kitchen, and my father sat at the head of the table, still sober, still in control of himself, still smiling at the guests, but his eyes, when they looked at me, were hard as a sniper's scope. "You came," he said without standing up. "Where is your husband?" "He has work, father. He will come later."
"Work," he scoffed.
"A real man's work is never more important than family. But you are independent. You will manage on your own. As always." I sat in the far corner, placed my hands on my belly, feeling my daughter kick, as if she knew that something was wrong, as if she was asking me to leave, as if she felt his malice through my blood, through my skin, through my nerves. I did not leave. I stayed because I wanted to prove that I was not afraid, because I wanted to show that I was stronger than he thought, and because there still lived in me that foolish, childish hope that my father, seeing my pregnancy, would soften, remember that I was his daughter, not an enemy, not his first wife, not a traitor. A hope that cost me a broken shoulder and premature labor. The guests arrived, the yard filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, the smell of grilled meat and cigarettes. I sat in the lounge chair, gripping a plastic cup of water, and watched my father move from one group to another, shaking hands, slapping backs, telling his army stories that everyone had heard 100 times, and at some point, after the sun set and the string lights came on, he walked over to me with a bottle of whiskey in his hand and sat down across from me. "We need to talk," he said, and it sounded not like a request, but like a command. "Talk." "The house you bought." He nodded toward the distance, as if the house was somewhere out there beyond the trees. "Derek needs it more. He is getting married. He needs his own place. You will transfer it to him." I did not laugh, though I wanted to. I looked at him and asked, "Are you suggesting that I give Derek the house I've been paying off for 8 years while he lived with you, and did not pay a single penny?" "Not give, transfer. For the sake of family. For the sake of your brother. You don't want him to start his family life under someone else's roof, do you?" "Father, he can start by renting an apartment or buying his own if he works instead of living off you." He downed his whiskey in one gulp, set the glass on the table, and his voice became quiet, so quiet that I could barely hear him over the noise of the party. "You think I don't know that you record conversations? You think I don't know that you have a voice recorder? You think I am afraid?" I said nothing. "I am not afraid of anything," he said, leaning closer, so close that I could smell the whiskey and tobacco. "I am afraid of only one thing, that you will take this child and raise him to be as independent a bastard who does not know what family means. But I will not allow it. Do you understand? I will not allow it." He left, and I remained sitting in the lounge chair, feeling my hands shake, and my daughter inside me grow still, as if frightened by his shouting, and I stroked my belly and whispered, "Everything will be fine. We will get through this. I promise." An hour later, after the third toast, after Victor had downed almost half a bottle and his face had turned red and his eyes had become glassy, he approached me again, this time loudly, deliberately theatrically, turning to the guests so they could hear. "Well, accountant," he said, leaning toward me, "have you calculated how much you are worth? How much your house is worth? How much you have stolen from this family? I have never taken anything from you, father. I earned my house myself. With your own hands, is that right?" He laughed, loudly, artificially. "Did you hear that, everyone? She did it herself. Mother heroine. Father is rolling in his grave looking at such an independent daughter. She lectures everyone about how independent she is, but she could not even bring her husband to the celebration. Where is he? Where is your husband? Did he leave you? Good. Who could stand such a bitch?" The guests fell silent. Someone coughed. Someone pretended not to hear. Derek stood at the grill, flipping meat, staring at the ground. My stepmother came out onto the porch and froze, not knowing whether to intervene or leave. My aunt and uncle exchanged glances, but said nothing. I slowly stood, gripping the arm of the lounge chair, my belly pulling downward, but I straightened up and looked my father in the eyes. "You want to make a scene? Go ahead. But my relationship with my husband is none of your business. My house is none of your business. My daughter is none of your business. You have no say in my life." None. Never again. I said it calmly, quietly, the way you speak to a child having a tantrum, and this was worse than if I had shouted. This was worse, because Victor could not tolerate a calm refusal. He was used to shouting, tears, submission, and I stood before him pregnant with a huge belly and looked at him as if he were nothing, as if he were an empty space. His face twitched, his eyes filled with blood. He looked at the table where an old metal tripod stood, the one Derek used for his camera when filming his videos. It was heavy, rusted at the joints, and Victor, 64 years old, a former military man, raised it like a club, and in his eyes there was no madness. There was cold, calculated rage, rage that he had been accumulating for 25 years. From the day my mother left, rage that he had been unleashing on me every time I refused to obey, rage that had finally found an outlet. I did not have time to step back. I turned, instinctively shielding my belly, and the tripod struck my shoulder, and I heard the crack, and I fell to my knees, and between my legs rushed warmth that should not have been there at 34 weeks. "Call an ambulance," someone screamed. "Call the police," someone else screamed. Derek ran toward me, white as chalk. My stepmother fainted. The guests froze, and I lay on the concrete slabs, feeling life leak out of me with the fluid, and I looked at my father, who stood over me, breathing heavily, looking at his hands as if he did not understand that he had just done this. You, he began but did not finish. "You killed my daughter," I said, and for the first time in my voice there was not anger, not fear, but cold, icy certainty. "You killed her."
He took a step back.
My daughter inside me went still. And 20 minutes later, when the ambulance was already pulling into the driveway and police sirens were wailing around the corner, I pulled my phone from the pocket of my torn blouse and pressed play. The recording played for exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds. I know because I counted, because counting was what I did, what I had always done. Numbers did not lie, numbers did not betray, numbers did not pick up tripods and swing them at their pregnant daughters. And as Victor's voice filled the frozen backyard, as his words from that kitchen conversation poured out of my phone speaker and washed over the 30 guests who had just watched him attack me, I watched their faces change. One by one, like dominoes falling, like lights switching off, like the moment when people who had spent years pretending not to see finally had no choice but to look. She has forgotten who is the head of this family. The house she bought should stay in the family. Derek is getting married. He needs his own place. She will transfer it to her brother. For the family's sake. Why would she do that? My aunt's voice came from the recording, distant, uncertain. "I will make her. We will throw her a birthday party. Let everyone see how ungrateful she is. And if she resists, we will threaten her with the police. We will say she is unstable, that the pregnancy is dangerous, that she is a danger to the child. The court will be on our side. She won't be able to prove otherwise." The backyard was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the cooler, the distant hum of a car on the highway, my own blood dripping onto the concrete. The paramedics had frozen too, their hands on the stretcher, their eyes on the phone, on my father, on me. Derek had stopped mid-stride, his face the color of the ash in the grill. My stepmother had come out of her faint and was sitting on the porch steps, her mouth open, her eyes fixed on Victor, who had not moved, who stood like a statue, like a man who had just realized that the walls he had built around himself for 25 years had crumbled in the span of a single phone call. "You recorded me," he said finally, his voice strange, not angry, not scared, something else, something I had never heard from him before, something that sounded almost like wonder. "You recorded me in my own house." "I record everything," I said, and the paramedics finally moved, lifting me onto the stretcher, strapping me in, checking my pulse, my blood pressure, the heartbeat of the daughter who had gone too still inside me.
"You taught me that. You taught me that people lie.
You taught me that the truth doesn't matter unless you can prove it." So I proved it. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and flashing lights and a paramedic named Marcus who kept talking to me, asking me questions I barely heard, keeping me conscious, keeping me focused, keeping me from drifting into the darkness that was pulling at the edges of my vision. "What's your name?" he asked for the 3rd time. "Nora." "How far along are you?" 34 weeks. "Do you know the sex of the baby?" "A girl. Her name is Elena." "That's a beautiful name."
"Elena."
"She's going to be fine, Nora. You're both going to be fine. Just stay with me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that my daughter would survive the fall, the shock, the premature evacuation from the only home she had ever known. But I had seen too much in my 14 years as an accountant, not medical training, no, but I had seen how quickly things could go wrong, how a decimal point in the wrong place could cost a company millions, how a signature on the wrong line could destroy a person's life, how a tripod swung in anger could end everything. The hospital was already expecting us. The trauma team was waiting. They wheeled me past the emergency room doors, past the waiting areas, past the families clutching coffee cups and each other, into a bright room with machines and lights and people in scrubs who moved with the precision of a well-audited ledger. We need to get her into surgery, a doctor said, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands. Her name was Dr. Singh. I would learn that later. At the time, she was just a voice, just a pair of hands, just the person who would decide whether my daughter lived or died. The placenta has partially detached. We need to deliver the baby now. She's only 34 weeks, I said, or maybe I only thought it. Maybe the words stayed inside my head, trapped behind the fog of pain and fear and the cold realization that my father had done this. My father had taken the one thing I thought I had protected, my daughter, my home, my future. 34 weeks is early, but it's not too early, Dr. Singh said, and she was kneeling beside me now, her face close to mine, her voice steady. Babies born at 34 weeks do very well, Nora. They need some support, some time in the NICU, but they do very well. Your daughter is going to be fine. But we need to act now. I nodded, or tried to, and then there was a mask over my face, and a coldness spreading through my veins, and the lights above me blurred into a single white glow, and I thought of my house, my brick house with the crooked porch, and the roses I had planted, and the empty nursery with the crib still in its box, and I thought of Victor, standing in the backyard, watching the ambulance leave, watching his power crumble, watching his daughter disappear. And then there was nothing. I woke in a room that smelled of antiseptic and flowers, the kind of flowers that arrive in plastic hospital vases, the kind that people send when they don't know what else to do. There were balloons too, pink ones, and a stuffed bear propped on the windowsill, and a card on the bedside table that I did not open because I already knew who it was from, and I already knew that I was not ready to read it. My shoulder was bandaged, immobilized. The crack in my bone was not a break. The doctor said, just a fracture, just a few weeks in a sling, just a reminder that would heal faster than the other wounds, the ones that did not show up on x-rays, the ones that would take years to close. A nurse came in, a young woman with a kind smile and a badge that said Maggie, and she told me that my daughter was in the NICU, that she was stable, that she was breathing on her own, that she was small but strong, that she had her mother's fighting spirit. Do you want to see her? Maggie asked. I nodded, and she helped me out of bed, helped me into a wheelchair, helped me down the hallway to a room full of incubators and monitors and tiny, fragile beings fighting for their first breath. And there she was, my Elena, smaller than I had imagined, red and wrinkled, with a tuft of dark hair, and her father's nose and my chin, and tubes, so many tubes, taped to her arms, her chest, her tiny feet. She's beautiful, I said, and I was crying. I did not know when I had started. I did not know when I would stop.
She's a fighter, Maggie said.
Just like her mother. The police came the next day, a detective named Miller, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. She sat in the plastic chair beside my hospital bed and asked me to tell her what had happened, and I did in order with times and dates and the precision of an accountant presenting an audit. You have the recording? She asked. I have 3 copies, I said. One on a flash drive in my kitchen, in a tin cookie box in the top drawer. One in cloud storage. One on my phone. You were prepared. I was careful. There's a difference. She nodded, wrote something in her notebook, asked me more questions about the weeks leading up to the party, about my father's threats, about the conversation where he had demanded that I transfer my house to Derek, about the moment he picked up the tripod and swung it at his pregnant daughter. He's been arrested, she said. He's being charged with aggravated assault on a pregnant person, and making criminal threats. The district attorney is also looking at charges related to attempted financial fraud, given the recording and his demands regarding your property. What about Derek? What about my stepmother? We're still investigating. Your brother claims he didn't know about the plan. Your stepmother says she wasn't involved. The recording suggests otherwise. The recording suggests that they were in the room. that they heard, that they didn't say anything to stop him. Silence can be its own kind of complicity, Detective Miller said, and she stood to leave. I'll keep you updated. In the meantime, focus on your daughter. Focus on healing. We'll handle the rest. The days that followed were a blur of NICU visits and police interviews and phone calls from relatives I had not spoken to in years, some offering support, some offering excuses for Victor, some demanding that I drop the charges, that I forgive him, that I remember that he was my father, that family was family, that blood was thicker than water. He's your father, Nora. You can't send him to prison. He tried to kill me and my daughter. He didn't mean it. He was drunk. He lost control. He's old.
He's sick.
He's sorry. He planned it. For a week. There's a recording. That recording was taken without his knowledge. It might not even be admissible in court. You should just drop the charges. For the sake of the family. I stopped answering the phone. I let the calls go to voicemail, let the messages pile up, let the words wash over me without sinking in. I had a daughter to focus on. A daughter who was gaining weight, who was breathing on her own, who was opening her eyes and looking at me with a gaze that seemed far too knowing for someone who had only been alive for a handful of days. You're going to be okay, I told her every day, multiple times a day, as if saying it would make it true, as if she could understand, as if she needed the reassurance as much as I did. You're going to be okay. I'm going to make sure of it. The call came on a Thursday, Detective Miller again, her voice clipped, professional, but with an undercurrent of something that might have been satisfaction. Nora, we've reviewed the security footage from your brother's house. The cameras caught the entire incident. There's no question about what happened. Your father's lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney is pushing for trial. With the video evidence and your recording, we have a very strong case. What kind of plea deal? He's offering to plead guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for probation. No prison time.
No.
That's what I told the DA. She agrees. Your father isn't getting probation. Not for this. I hung up and sat in the silence of my hospital room, the sun setting outside the window, the lights of the city flickering to life, and I thought about Victor, sitting in a jail cell, waiting for his lawyer to call, waiting for his daughter to save him, the way she had always saved him, by staying quiet, by not fighting back, by accepting that his word was law and her voice did not matter. Those days were over. I was discharged a week later, my shoulder still in a sling, my body still healing, but my daughter still in the NICU, still too small to come home, still fighting her own fight. I visited her every day, twice a day, sometimes more. I sat by her incubator and read to her from the books I had bought before she was born. Good Night Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I did not know if she could hear me, but I needed to believe that she could, that my voice was reaching her, that she knew she was not alone. The house felt strange when I finally returned to it. The brick rancher with the crooked porch, the roses I had planted, the nursery with the crib still in its box. I had planned to paint the walls a soft yellow, to hang the mobile with the little birds, to fold the tiny onesies and stack them in the dresser drawers, but I had not had time, and now the room stood empty, waiting, like me, for Elena to come home. I opened the top drawer of the kitchen cabinet and took out the tin cookie box. The flash drive was still inside, along with copies of the recording and screenshots of the text messages I had saved. I held it in my hand for a long time, feeling its weight, its importance, its power, and then I put it back, closed the drawer, and walked to the nursery. I had work to do. The trial was scheduled for 6 months after the assault, 6 months of waiting, of preparing, of watching my daughter grow stronger in the NICU until finally, after 9 long weeks, she was strong enough to come home. I brought her to the brick rancher with the crooked porch, to the room I had painted soft yellow, to the crib that no longer stood empty, and I stood in the doorway, holding her against my chest, and I made her a promise that I would spend the rest of my life keeping. No one will ever hurt you, Elena. No one will ever make you feel small, or powerless, or afraid. You will grow up knowing that you are strong, that you are worthy, that you belong to no one but yourself. She blinked up at me, her dark eyes unfocused, her tiny fist curled against my collarbone, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been broken and was now beginning to mend, not fully, not quickly, but enough to hope. The months leading up to the trial were filled with depositions and legal paperwork and meetings with the prosecutor, a woman named Sarah who reminded me of myself, precise, methodical, unwilling to leave any detail unexamined. She had reviewed the evidence, watched the security footage, listened to the recording, and she was confident that we would win. Your father's lawyer is going to try to paint you as unstable, as unreliable, as someone who provoked the incident and is now exaggerating the extent of her injuries. He can try.
He will.
He's going to bring up your mental health history, your decision to record family conversations, your estrangement from your father before the assault. He's going to suggest that you were looking for a reason to cut ties with your family and that you manufactured this conflict to justify it. I have the recording. I have the video. I have medical records showing the extent of my injuries and the premature birth of my daughter. I have witnesses who saw him swing the tripod. He doesn't have any of that. He has 30 years of being the patriarch of this family. He has people who will lie for him, who will say they didn't see what they saw, who will claim that the recording was doctored or that you provoked him or that you fell on your own. We need to be prepared for that. I nodded, and I thought about my aunt and uncle, about my brother Derek, about my stepmother, about all the people who had been in that backyard and who would now have to choose between the truth and their loyalty to Victor. I did not know what they would do, but I knew what I would do. I would tell the truth, I would let the evidence speak, and I would trust that the jury would see what I had seen. The trial began on a Monday. The courthouse was old, stone, imposing, the kind of building that made you feel small when you walked through its doors. I sat at the prosecution table, next to Sarah Chen, my shoulder long since healed but the scar still visible, a thin white line that I did not bother to hide. I wanted the jury to see it, to know that it was real, to understand that Victor's violence had left marks that would not fade. Victor sat at the defense table, flanked by his lawyer, a man named Bradford Stone who had a reputation for defending wealthy clients accused of terrible crimes. He was silver-haired, smooth-tongued, the kind of lawyer who could make a jury believe that black was white and up was down if it meant winning his case. My father looked older than I remembered, thinner, grayer, more fragile. The months in jail had worn him down, stripped away the bluster and the bravado, left behind a man who seemed smaller than the one who had swung a tripod at his pregnant daughter. But I did not let myself feel sorry for him. Pity was a luxury I could not afford, not when the memory of that night was still so sharp, so fresh, so present. All rise, the Honorable Judge Patricia Okonkwo presiding. The judge was a woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a firm voice. She had been on the bench for 20 years, had seen every kind of case, every kind of lie, every kind of betrayal, and she was not easily impressed or intimidated. This is a case regarding the assault of Nora Vasquez by her father, Victor Vasquez, on the night of August 17th. The prosecution will present evidence that the defendant struck the victim with a metal tripod, causing her to fall and suffer premature labor, resulting in the birth of her daughter 9 weeks early. The defense maintains that the defendant acted in self-defense and that the victim's injuries were exaggerated. How does the prosecution wish to proceed? Sarah Chen stood, her posture straight, her voice steady. The prosecution calls Nora Vasquez to the stand. I walked to the witness box, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and I sat down looking out at the courtroom, at Victor, at his lawyer, at the jury, at the strangers who had come to watch a family tear itself apart in public. Ms. Vasquez, can you tell the court what happened on the night of August 17th? I was at my brother's house for a family celebration. My father approached me and demanded that I transfer ownership of my house to my brother, Derek. When I refused, he became angry, picked up a metal tripod, and swung it at me. Where did the tripod strike you? My shoulder. I turned to protect my belly, and it hit my shoulder instead. And what happened after that? I fell. My water broke. I was taken to the hospital, where I gave birth to my daughter 9 weeks early. Did you do anything to provoke your father before he swung the tripod? I told him that my house was none of his business, that my daughter was none of his business, that he had no say in my life. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten him. I did not touch him. And, do you have any evidence of what happened that night? I have a recording of a conversation my father had a week before the party, in which he outlined a plan to humiliate me and pressure me into giving him my house. I have security footage from my brother's house showing the assault. I have medical records documenting my injuries and my daughter's premature birth. She entered the evidence one piece at a time, the recording, the footage, the medical records, and the jury watched, listened, absorbed. Victor's face was pale, his lawyer was shifting in his seat, and I kept my eyes on the jury, on their faces, on their reactions, because I needed to know if they believed me, if they saw what I saw, if they understood that I was not the villain in the story. Bradford Stone cross-examined me for 3 hours. He tried to poke holes in my testimony, to undermine my credibility, to suggest that I had fabricated the recording, that I had exaggerated my injuries, that I had provoked my father into attacking me. Ms. Vasquez, isn't it true that you have a history of conflict with your father? Yes, we have had disagreements about my independence, my career, my choices. Isn't it true that you have been estranged from him for years? We have had periods of distance, but we have always remained in contact. Isn't it true that you've been diagnosed with anxiety and depression? Yes, I have been diagnosed with anxiety and depression, but those diagnoses do not make me a liar, and they do not make me responsible for my father's decision to attack me. Isn't it true that you recorded conversations with your father without his knowledge, in violation of state law? I recorded conversations in my own home, in my own presence, which is legal in the state, and I did it because my father had a history of making threats that he later denied, and I wanted to protect myself. Isn't it true that you could have avoided the confrontation by leaving the party earlier? I could have, yes, but I should not have to leave my own family celebration to avoid being attacked by my father. He had no answer for that, and he sat down, and the jury looked at him, and I knew that they had heard enough. Victor took the stand on the third day. His lawyer had advised him not to, but he insisted. He wanted to tell his side of the story, wanted to explain that he was not a monster, that he was just a father who had lost control, that he loved me, that he was sorry, that he had never meant to hurt me or his granddaughter. Mr. Vasquez, can you tell the court what happened on the night of August 17th? I was drunk. I don't remember everything clearly, but I remember arguing with my daughter. I remember her saying things that upset me, and I remember picking up the tripod. I didn't mean to hit her. I just wanted to scare her. Did you intend to hit her? No, I was aiming for the ground. I was trying to make a point. I didn't realize how close she was standing. And what about the recording, Mr. Vasquez? The recording in which you discussed a plan to humiliate your daughter and pressure her into giving up her house. I was angry when I said those things. I didn't mean them. I was just venting. I never would have actually done any of that. But you did do it, Mr. Vasquez. You did humiliate her. You did pressure her, and you did attack her. The recording proves that you planned it, and the video proves that you did it. He had no answer for that, and his lawyer declined to ask him any further questions, and the jury watched him step down from the stand, and I watched him, and I felt nothing, not anger, not pity, not forgiveness, just the cold, quiet certainty that he had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. The jury deliberated for 3 days, 3 days of waiting, of hoping, of praying. I stayed at home with Elena, holding her, feeding her, watching her sleep, trying not to imagine what would happen if the jury did not believe me, if Victor walked free, if he came after me again. He won't, Sarachin said when I called her on the second day. The evidence is too strong. The video alone is enough to convict him. The recording is just the nail in the coffin. What if his lawyer convinces them that I provoked him, that I'm unstable, that I'm lying? The jury saw the video. Nora, they saw him swing the tripod. They saw you fall. They saw you protect your belly. They know the truth, and they will do the right thing. On the third day, the jury returned with a verdict. The courtroom was packed. The tension was thick. Victor sat at the defense table, his face pale, his hands shaking. I sat at the prosecution table, holding a photo of Elena in my hand, a recent one, where she was smiling, healthy, alive. We, the jury, in the case of the state versus Victor Vasquez, find the defendant guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. My stepmother screamed. Derek buried his face in his hands. My aunt and uncle sat in stunned silence, and I sat at the prosecution table, holding my daughter's photo, and I did not cry. I had cried enough. Now it was time to heal. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 1 month after the verdict, 1 month of waiting, of preparing victim impact statements, of watching Elena grow stronger, more alert, more present. She was smiling now, real smiles. not just the reflexive gas-releasing grimaces that new parents mistake for joy. She looked at me with those dark eyes, and I saw myself in them. The determination, the stubbornness, the refusal to be broken, and I knew that she would be okay, that we would both be okay, that the worst was behind us. The prosecution asked for the maximum sentence, 10 years, citing the premeditated nature of the attack, the vulnerability of the victim, the lasting physical and emotional trauma inflicted on both me and my premature daughter. The defense asked for probation, arguing that Victor was old, that he had no prior criminal record, that he was genuinely remorseful, that prison would be a death sentence for a man of his age and declining health. Remorse, Sarah Chen said during the sentencing hearing, her voice sharp, her eyes fixed on Victor, who sat at the defense table with his head bowed, his hands clasped in front of him. Where was the remorse when he planned the attack, when he recruited his family to help him humiliate his daughter, when he picked up the tripod and swung it at a pregnant woman, when he stood over her and watched her bleed on the concrete, when he waited 20 minutes for an ambulance and never once asked if she was okay? Where was the remorse then? Victor's lawyer stood, his voice soft, his manner apologetic. My client is not the monster the prosecution describes. He is a flawed man, a man who made terrible choices, a man who let his past trauma blind him to the humanity of his own daughter. But he is not beyond redemption. He is not beyond forgiveness, and he is not beyond the love of his family, who have asked this court to show him mercy. The judge looked at the defense table, at Victor, at his lawyer, at the letters submitted by relatives who still believed in him, who still hoped that he could change, who still wanted him to be part of their lives. Then she looked at me, at my scarred shoulder, at the photo of Elena that I had placed on the prosecution table, at the written statement I had submitted detailing the months of recovery, the sleepless nights, the fear that still gripped me every time I heard a loud noise or saw a raised hand. Ms. Vasquez, do you have anything you wish to say before I deliver my sentence? I stood, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I had prepared a statement, written and rewritten it a dozen times, but now, standing in front of the judge, the jury, my father, my family, I set it aside and spoke from the place I had been avoiding for 34 years, the place where my voice lived, the place that Victor had tried to silence. When I was 7 years old, my father told me that the world was full of people who would try to take what was mine. He said that the only way to protect myself was to be stronger than them, to be smarter than them, to never let them see me bleed. I believed him. I spent my whole life being strong, being smart, hiding my wounds, and then, on the night of August 17th, I realized something. I realized that the person I needed to protect myself from was him. He was the one who wanted to take what was mine. He was the one who wanted to see me bleed. He was the one who had been lying to me for 34 years about who I needed to fear. I paused, looking at Victor, who was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. I did not know if they were real. I did not know if they were for me or for himself, and I decided that it did not matter. I am not asking you to send my father to prison because I hate him. I am asking you to send him to prison because I love my daughter, and I need to know that she will grow up in a world where the people who are supposed to protect her do not hurt her, where the people who are supposed to love her do not try to destroy her, where she never has to wonder if her father's hand will turn into a weapon. I sat down, and the courtroom was silent, and the judge nodded, and then she delivered her sentence. Mr. Vasquez, I have heard the arguments from both sides. I have read the letters from your family, and I have considered the trauma inflicted on your daughter and your granddaughter. I am sentencing you to 5 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. I am also ordering you to have no contact with your daughter or her child except through a court-approved mediator. And I am ordering you to pay restitution for Ms. Vasquez's medical expenses and legal fees. Victor's face crumbled. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. My stepmother wailed. Derek sat in stunned silence, and I sat at the prosecution table, holding the photo of my daughter, and I felt something I had not expected. Not relief, not satisfaction, not closure, just a quiet, exhausted emptiness, the same emptiness I had felt when I first saw the blood on the concrete, the same emptiness I had felt when I heard Elena's first cry in the NICU, the same emptiness that I had been carrying for 34 years, and was only now beginning to understand. The weeks after the sentencing were strange, disorienting, like waking from a dream that had lasted my entire life, not knowing what was real and what had been imagined, not knowing who I was without the weight of my father's expectations, his judgments, his constant, low-grade disappointment in every choice I made. I had spent my whole life trying to prove myself to him, trying to earn his approval, trying to be good enough. And now he was gone, and I did not know who I was without that struggle. I threw myself into caring for Elena, into rebuilding my life, into the quiet, steady work of healing. I painted the nursery, finally, a soft yellow that reminded me of sunlight. I hung the mobile with the little birds. I folded the tiny onesies and stacked them in the dresser drawers. I sat in the rocking chair that my grandmother had left me and held my daughter and watched her sleep. And I let myself feel something I had been afraid to feel for a very long time: hope. Derek came to visit me once, a few months after the sentencing. He looked older, thinner, more tired. The guilt of his silence had aged him, and I could see it in the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the slump of his shoulders. "I'm sorry, Nora. I'm sorry for not stopping him. I'm sorry for not saying anything. I'm sorry for being a coward." "You were scared, Derek. We were all scared. You can't change the past. You can only change the future. Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" "I already have, not because you deserve it, not because I've forgotten, but because I need to let go, because I need to heal, because I need to be free." He nodded, his eyes wet, his voice thick with emotion. And then he left, and I did not know if I would see him again, but I knew that I would not chase him, I would not beg him, I would not make it easy for him. He needed to earn it, he needed to work for it, he needed to prove that he was different. My stepmother did not visit, did not call, did not write. She had chosen Victor, had chosen to believe his version of events, had chosen to see me as the villain who had destroyed the family, and I let her go. I did not have the energy to fight for people who did not want to be fought for. I had a daughter to raise, a life to build, a future to protect. The cards and letters from other relatives stopped eventually. The calls from reporters stopped too. The story faded from the news, replaced by newer tragedies, newer scandals, newer families tearing themselves apart in public, and I was grateful for the silence, for the anonymity, for the chance to disappear into the ordinary rhythms of motherhood and work and the slow, steady work of rebuilding. I returned to my job as an accountant, part-time at first, then full-time. The construction company had held my position for me, had sent flowers when Elena was born, had offered to start a fund to help with medical expenses. I declined. I did not need their charity. I had my savings, my house, my daughter. I had enough. Victor was released from prison after 3 years. Good behavior, early parole. He moved into a small apartment in another state. Not the house he had lost, not the life he had once known, but a cramped one-bedroom with cheap furniture and thin walls and the smell of cigarette smoke from the neighbors. I heard through Derek that he was sick, that his health was failing, that he was alone, that he had no one to take care of him. I did not visit, did not call, did not write. I had made my peace with him in the courtroom, had said what I needed to say, had let him go. I did not need to see him again, did not need to hear his apologies, did not need to pretend that we could be a family. We couldn't, not after everything, not after the tripod, not after the blood, not after the months of fear and healing and learning to trust again. Derek asked me if I wanted to see him before the end, if I wanted to say goodbye, if I wanted to give him the chance to apologize one last time. I've already said goodbye. Derek, I said goodbye in the courtroom. I said goodbye when I walked out of the hospital with Elena. I said goodbye when I painted the nursery yellow and hung the mobile with the little birds and started living my life without him in it. I don't need anything from him. Not an apology, not an explanation, not a last-minute reconciliation. I have everything I need. I have my daughter. I have my home. I have myself. He didn't understand, couldn't understand. The way that people who have never been broken can't understand what it takes to put yourself back together, but he didn't argue, didn't push, didn't try to change my mind. He just nodded and let me go. Victor died on a Tuesday, 3 years after his release, for years after the tripod, 5 years after Elena was born. I did not learn about it from Derek, who had stopped calling after I refused to visit our father on his deathbed. I learned about it from a lawyer, a woman named Margaret Chen, who had been hired to handle Victor's estate, which was not an estate at all. Just a small apartment full of second-hand furniture and unpaid bills and the accumulated debris of a man who had spent his whole life trying to control everyone around him and had ended up controlling no one, not even himself. Ms. Vasquez, I'm sorry to inform you that your father passed away 3 days ago. He had no other living relatives besides you and your brother has declined to serve as executor, which leaves you as the default choice. I understand if this is difficult, and I want you to know that you are under no obligation to accept. What happens if I decline? The state will step in, they will handle the disposition of his assets and any outstanding debts. It will be a slow process, but it will happen. You don't have to be involved. What kind of assets are we talking about? Very little, I'm afraid. A small life insurance policy, some personal belongings, the apartment which is rented, not owned. There may be some debts as well. I'm still working through the paperwork. I sat in the silence of my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, my daughter playing in the living room, her laughter drifting through the house like a blessing I did not deserve, but had somehow received anyway. I decline, Ms. Chun. I don't want anything from him. Not his money, not his belongings, not his debts. I let him go a long time ago, and I'm not going to bring him back now. I understand, Ms. Vasquez. I'll make a note of it in the file. I'm sorry for your loss, even if it's not a loss you feel. Thank you, Ms. Chun. I appreciate that. I hung up the phone and sat at the kitchen table, the one where I had sat with my flash drive and my tin cookie box, the one where I had planned my escape, the one where I had made the decision that saved my life and my daughter's, and I did not cry. I did not feel relief. I did not feel anything except the quiet acknowledgement that a chapter had closed, a chapter one had never wanted to read, a chapter one was glad to leave behind. Elena was 4 years old when Victor died. She was tall for her age, with dark hair and dark eyes and a stubborn chin that I recognized from my own childhood photos. She asked questions about her grandfather sometimes, about where he was, about why we never visited him, about why other children had grandfathers and she did not. Grandpa Victor was not a safe person, sweetheart. He made choices that hurt people, and because of those choices, he couldn't be part of our lives. Did he hurt you, Mommy? Yes, baby, he did. But I'm okay now, and you're okay, and that's what matters. Do you miss him? I miss the idea of him, the grandfather you deserved, the father I needed, but I don't miss the man he was, because that man was not capable of being what we needed, and I've made peace with that. She nodded, accepting my answer the way children accept things they don't fully understand, and then she ran off to play, and I watched her go, and I thought about Victor, about the choices he had made, about the choices I had made, about the way that some wounds heal clean and some leave scars that never fade, and I decided that it was enough that the wounds were closed, even if the scars remained. I never remarried, never found someone who could understand the weight I carried, the vigilance I maintained, the constant, low-grade awareness that people could hurt you even when they claimed to love you. I dated, sometimes, when Elena was with a babysitter or at a friend's house, but I never let anyone get close enough to see the parts of me that were still healing, still tender, still afraid. The house was mine, fully mine now, the mortgage paid off, the deed in my name, no liens, no claims, no shadows of Victor's greed hanging over it. I had done it. I had kept my home. I had kept my daughter. I had kept myself, and that was a victory, even if it was a quiet one, even if no one clapped, even if there was no parade. I still recorded conversations, old habits dying hard. I still carried my phone with me everywhere, still saved messages, still documented interactions that felt off or threatening or wrong. Elena asked me about it once, when she was 6, when she saw me slip my phone into my pocket before my stepmother came to visit. Why do you always do that, Mommy? Because sometimes people say things that they don't mean to say, and it's important to remember what they actually said, not what they wish they had said. Is that why you won the trial? Because you remembered what Grandpa said. Yes, baby, that's exactly why. She nodded, satisfied, and ran off to play, and I stood in the kitchen, my phone in my pocket, my hand on the tin cookie box in the top drawer, and I thought about the difference between being paranoid and being prepared, the difference between living in fear and living with awareness, the difference between letting the past define you and letting it inform you. Derek called me when Elena was 7. He was getting married, again, to a woman I had never met. He wanted me to come to the wedding, wanted Elena to be a flower girl, wanted to pretend that we were a family, that the past was behind us, that the wounds had healed. I don't know, Derek. I don't know if I'm ready to be around that side of the family again. I don't know if I'm ready to see stepmother, to see aunt and uncle, to see all the people who watched Victor hurt me and did nothing to stop him. They've changed, Nora. They've grown. They've apologized. They want to make amends. Apologies don't undo what they did. Derek, apologies don't give me back the years I lost to fear and healing. Apologies don't make me trust people who stood by and watched while I bled. What about me? Do you trust me? I trust that you're trying. Derek, I trust that you love me. I trust that you're not the same person who froze in that backyard. But trust is not a light switch. It's a muscle. It takes time to build, and it atrophies when it's not used. You haven't used it much. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said something I did not expect. I'm in therapy, Nora. I've been going for 2 years. I'm trying to understand why I froze, why I didn't stop him, why I let him control me for so long. I'm trying to be better, not for you, for me, for my future, for my children. That's good, Derek. That's really good. I'm proud of you. Does that mean you'll come to the wedding? I'll think about it. I can't promise anything, but I'll think about it. I didn't go to the wedding in the end. I sent a gift and a card and my regrets. I was not ready to face the people who had watched me fall, who had done nothing to catch me, who had let Victor's version of events become the family's version of events. Maybe someday I would be ready, but that day was not today, and I was learning to be okay with that. Elena started school when she was 6. She was nervous, shy, the way children are when they've been raised by a mother who taught them that the world was not always safe, that people could hurt you even when they claimed to love you, that the best way to protect yourself was to pay attention, to document, to remember. What if the other kids don't like me, Mommy? Then they're not your people, baby, and you'll find your people. They're out there, I promise. What if the teacher is mean? Then you tell me, and I will handle it. I've handled mean people before. I'm very good at it. She laughed, and I walked her to the schoolyard, and I watched her join a group of children playing on the swings, and I stood there for a long time, watching her find her people, watching her grow, watching her become the person that Victor had tried so hard to destroy. I thought about the tripod, about the blood, about the ambulance, about the months of healing, about the trial, about the sentencing, about the phone call from the lawyer telling me that Victor was dead, and I thought about the daughter I had carried, the daughter I had protected, the daughter who was now swinging on a swing set, laughing, alive, free. You did it. I whispered to myself, to Elena, to the version of me that had been broken and had somehow, miraculously, put herself back together. You did it. Here's what I want you to know. If you're watching this and you see yourself in my story, the one who was hurt by someone who was supposed to protect you, the one who was told that family was family and you had to forgive, the one who was told that blood was thicker than water and that you owed your abuser your silence, hear me, you owe them nothing, not your silence, not your forgiveness, not your presence, not your love. You owe yourself the chance to heal, to grow, to become the person you were meant to be before they tried to break you. And survival is not pretty, it's not clean. It's not a movie where the credits roll and everyone lives happily ever after. Survival is messy. It's years of therapy and healing and learning to trust again. It's forgiving yourself for not being perfect, for not being strong enough, for not being fast enough, for not being enough. It's planting roses in a garden and waiting for them to bloom. It's sitting on a porch and watching your daughter swing and letting go of the weight you've been carrying your whole life. But survival is also yours. No one can take it from you. Not the father who tried to destroy you, not the family who didn't protect you, not the people who told you to forgive and forget. You survived, and that is the only victory that matters. My name is Nora Vasquez. I'm 39 years old. I live in a brick rancher with a crooked porch and a garden full of roses. I have a daughter who is smart and kind and strong, a brother who is learning to be better, and a past that no longer defines me. I don't have a perfect life. I don't have a happy ending, but I have peace, and peace, I have learned, is the best revenge. The tripod is gone. The scars are faded. The house is mine. The daughter is mine. The life is mine. And I am free, finally, completely, utterly free. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect you, if you've ever had to fight for your own survival, leave a comment. Tell me, what did you survive? Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.